In other words, all the ways that life feels like life at age 55 were strewn around me like poppies. My daughter, Clarissa Bascombe, was still asleep. The house quiet, empty but for the usual coffee aromas and the agreeable weft of dampness. But when I read Ms. McCurdy's reply to her assassin's question, I'm sure he had never contemplated an answer himself. I just stood right up out of my chair, my heart suddenly wonking, my hands, fingers cold and a tingle, my scalp tightened down against my cranium the way it does when a train goes by too close. And I said out loud, with no one to hear me, I said, "Holy shit! How in the world did she ever know that?" All up and down this middle section of seaboard, the press is the Jersey Shore's paper of record, there must have been hundreds of similar rumblings and inaudible alarms ringing household to household upon Ms. McCurdy's last words being taken in, like distant explosions, registering as wonder and then anxiety in the sensitive. Elephants feel the fatal footfalls of poachers 100 miles off. Cats exit the room in a hurry when oysters are opened. On and on and on and on. The unseen exists and has properties. Would I ever say that? Was, of course, what my question meant in real speak, and the question everybody from Highlands to Little Egg would have been darkly pondering. It's not a question, let's face it, that suburban life regularly poses to us. Suburban life, in fact, pretty much does the opposite. And yet it might. Faced with Mr. Clevenger's question and a little pushed for time, I'm sure I would have begun soundlessly inventorying all the things I hadn't done yet. Fucked a movie star, adopted Vietnamese orphan twins and sent them to Williams, hiked the Appalachian Trail, brought help to a benighted, drought-ravaged African nation, learned German, been appointed ambassador to a country nobody else wanted but I did, voted Republican. I would have thought about whether my organ donor card was signed, whether my list of pallbearers was updated, whether my obituary had the important new details added, whether, in other words, I'd gotten my message out properly. So, in all likelihood, what I would have said to Mr. Clevenger as the autumn breezes twirled in through the windows off bright Paloma Playa, and the nursing girls held their sweet bubblegum breaths waiting to hear, would have been, "You know, not really. I guess not. Not quite yet." Whereupon he would have shot me anyway, though conceivably not himself. When I'd thought only this far through the sad and dreary conundrum, I realized I no longer had my usual interest in the routines of my morning. 50 sit-ups, 40 push-ups, some neck stretches, a bowl of cereal and fruit, a manumitting interlude in the men's room. And that what this story of Miss McCurdy's unhappy end had caused in me was a need for a harsh, invigorating, mind-clearing plunge in the briny. It was the 16th of November, a precise week before Thanksgiving, and the Atlantic was as nickel-polished, clean-surfaced, and stilly cold as old Neptune's heart. When you first buy by the ocean, you're positive you'll take a morning dip every single day and that life will be commensurately happier, last longer, you'll be jollier. The old pump getting a fresh prime at about the hour many are noticing the first symptoms of their myocardial infarct. Only you don't. Yet we can all be moved, if we're lucky. And I was, by Miss McCurdy. So that some contact with the sudden and the actual seemed demanded. And not, as I found my bathing suit in the drawer, got in it and headed barefoot out the side door and down the sandy steps into the brisk beach airishness. Not that I was really frightened by the little saga. Death and its low-lying ambuscade don't scare me much. Not anymore. This summer, in clean-lawned, regulation-size, by-the-numbers Rochester, Minnesota, I got over Big D death in a swift, once-and-for-all and official way. gave up on the forever concept. As things now stand, I won't outlive my mortgage, my 25-year roof, possibly not even my car. My mother's so-so genes, breast cancer genes, giving percolating rise to prostate cancer genes, giving rise to its anybody's guess what next, had finally gained a lap on me. Thus, the refugees' sad plight in Gaza, the float on the Euro, the hole in the polar ice cap, the big one rumbling in on the Bay Area like a fleet of Harleys, the presence of heavy metals in mother's milk, all that seemed dire, it's true, but was frankly tolerable from my end of the telescope. It was simply that, moved as I was, and with the coming week full of surprises and the usual holiday morbidities, I wanted reminding in the most sensate of ways that I was alive. In the waning weeks of this millennial year, in which I promised myself as a New Year's, New Century's resolution to simplify some things, but haven't quite yet, I needed to get right, to get to where Ms. McCurdy was at her ending song, or at least close enough to it that if I was faced with something like the question she was faced with, I would give something like the answer she gave. So, in my bare feet, with a cold breeze pricking my exposed back, chest, legs, I tender-footed it up and across the gritty berm, through the beach grass and off onto the surprisingly cold sand. A white lifeguard stand stood nobly but vacated on the beach. The tide was out, revealing a glistening black, damp, and sloping sand plain. Someone had broken off for firewood the beach sign, so that only "Own Risk" was left in red block letters on its standard. Seacliff, midline Jersey Shore, midline November, can be the best of locales and days. Any one of the 2,300 of us who live here year-round will tell you. The feeling of people nearby enjoying life, whiling it away, out for a ramble, taking it in, is everywhere about. Only the people themselves are gone. Gone back to Williamsport and Sparta and Demopolis. Only the solitary-seeming winter residents, the slow joggers, the single-dog walkers, the skinny men with metal detectors, their wives in the van waiting, reading John Grisham. These are who's here. And not even them at 7 a.m. Up the beach and down was mostly empty. A container ship many miles offshore inched along the horizon's flat line. A rain squall that would never reach land hung against the lightening eastern sky. I took a sampling glance back at my house. All mirrored windows, little belvederes, copper copings, a weather vane on the topmost gable. I didn't want Clarissa to get up from her bed, have a stretch and a scratch, cast a welcoming eye toward the sea, and suddenly believe that her dad was taking the deep six plunge alone. Happily, though, I saw no one watching me. Only the first sun warming the windows and turning them crimson and hot gold. Of course, you'd know what I wondered. Who wouldn't? You can't go for a November morning's rejuvenating, self-actualizing dip craving a taste of the irrefutable, the unnuanced, of nature's necessity, and not be curious to know if you're on a secret mission. Secret from yourself. Can you? Certainly some, I thought, as the languid and surprisingly frigid Atlantic inched up my thighs, the sand creamy and flat under my toes, my dangle parts beginning to retract in alarm. Surely some slip peacefully over the transom of pleasure craft, as the poet supposedly did, or swim out far too far of an evening until the land falls dreamily away. But they probably don't say, "Oops, uh-oh, damn, look at here. I'm in a real mess now, am I truly not?" Frankly, I'd like to know what the hell they do say while they wait in death's anteroom, the lights of the departing boat growing dim, the water colder, choppier than anticipated. Maybe they are a little surprised by themselves, by how final events can suddenly